So yeah, I jumped into a carpentry and joinery trade for 4 years, which was hell, absolute hell. 16-year-old boy, secretly gay, moving into an industry that's male dominated experience where you start to better understand your identity, your environment, the different things that are going on in those spaces that you can really slowly adapt and change. And
Welcome to the Leap Podcast. My name's Colin Brown, and today's guest we have Connor Coburn. How's things, bud?
aye, not bad, thanks, not bad. Thanks very much for having me on.
Aye, no problem. Obviously, we spoke for a couple of months. We met at the Largo Castaway Sauna, and as soon as I met you, I kind of thought, you know what, he seems like he's got an interesting journey. I believe all of us have got an interesting journey or story of some kind. And maybe we'll relate in some ways, maybe we won't relate in other ways, but I'm sure people listening and watching will be able to relate, and that's what Leap's all about, is having these brave conversations, opening up about things that have maybe happened in your life that have been challenges, but you've obviously made it through them, and I believe that you're in a good kind of place in life right now, so a perfect kind of guest to get on. So we'll just kind of start off. If you could just kind of take me back to your childhood and how things kind of were when you were growing up until where we are today.
Okay. Yeah, childhood for me was pretty normal, I would say. It was a pretty normal childhood. Grew up in Cairney Hill in Fife. Was at a public school, public primary school, public high school. And typically I would say it was a pretty normal upbringing. I've got a big brother, 2 years older than me. Mum and dad, loving family. I was well looked after and well loved. So yeah, I think typically speaking, it was pretty normal, kind of going through a lot of experiences that a lot of other people do go through as well. Like probably went through little spats of kind of bullying here and there, which, you know, a lot of people can relate to. So yeah, it's bits like that were tough. Like I started off at Cairney Hill Primary School and then moved village part way through that, which kind of prompted some of that stuff that wasn't so nice. But never for long and never severe. You know, you kind of got through it. It was just kind of typical what it was like growing up as a kid at that kind of age in the 90s. But yeah, I would say it was pretty normal. There was probably a bit of a shadow that was always cast in my head when I was growing up, and that was always to do with my sexuality. It was something that I didn't understand as a child, but it's something that a lot of people might not realise this, but when you are like gay or whatever you might be, that's not something that just happens when you're 16 or 18 or whatever. You know, it's something that happens from a very young age that you start noticing. So that was a challenge. Having that in the back of my mind and always just wondering what that meant for me and what it really was. So typically, really good childhood. I just feel there was always a little bit of a shadow cast.
Cool. Aye, like you say with bullying and that, obviously I've got a young child now, so it kind of worries me. Actually, as she grows up, kind of, as something that kids are subjected to, and it's how you react to it. It could shape your life. So obviously, you got through it, and kind of how did it kind of develop for there?
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, you know, because it wasn't so severe that I'm like victim kind of, and I'm thinking like, oh, poor me, you know, that this, for me, I was quite fortunate that it never lasted long, and I always had really great friendships around about it. And as I progressed through life, I don't feel like that from primary school was something that affected me, or from high school was something that affected me long term. There was, we'll kind of come on to as we go through the overall journey, there was bits of it in the workplace and stuff that have happened over time, which we'll kind of come on to, which is probably more impactful than it was in my childhood. But yeah, so was at high school at Queen Anne in Dunfermline, and from there went into my first job, which was as an apprentice joiner, and done that for 4 years. Something that I had no interest in whatsoever. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Didn't want to stay at school. Dad was in the trade, so it was just, son, I can get you an apprenticeship. So everyone should have a trade behind them. It's good to fall back on. That same old story. So yeah, I jumped into a carpentry and joinery trade for 4 years, which was hell, absolute hell. 16-year-old boy, secretly gay, moving into an industry that's male dominated, and
Aye, that's kind of what my initial reaction was. Obviously, it's a male dominant environment. So did that kind of make you kind of go more into your shell with that kind of coming out, or did you come out before then, or was it kind of something that you was worrying or kind of playing on your mind?
it was all. It probably made it play on my mind even more, and made the feeling even worse because they would make jokes. Like, I was a small company I worked with, and it was like a small group of guys that we would work beside, ranging from people in their 30s right up to like their 60s, mostly kind of older men. But yeah, it made me retract even more into myself, and I was genuinely terrified that I would get caught, that I would get found out, they would notice, they would know. I just thought that my life would end, and the way that I could see it, it was almost like I knew that at some point it would happen, and it was almost like I couldn't see my life beyond that date. It was like that was almost like my expiration date. The day I get found out is probably the day that I expire, and I was always trying to just prevent that from happening. But when I was in the trade, I had a panic attack one day, just totally out of the blue. My hands were all tingly. I felt like I could barely breathe. And the owner of the company came and picked me up and took me home, and he said, "You've had a panic attack. That's what's happened to you." And really supportive and really nice, but didn't know why. And I kind of knew why, but I was in denial myself. But yeah, that just started to happen more and more frequently, unexplained. Like, it was just happening, and there was nothing. There was no trigger. Nothing happened that made me panic or anything. It was just, it happened more and more often. So that was a really tough time, just not knowing when to expect that to happen and how to kind of get out of it.
Aye, I've been working with a lot of the older guys as well. I think back then, 90s or
Yeah.
early 2000s, it probably wasn't accepted as much.
No.
So it probably made it even harder for you to can want to maybe share to someone, but then it was like, who do I share with? So, uh, so big respect for you to obviously eventually do it. You can't live a lie, yeah. Kind of mean, it's something that you've got to be yourself, and it's obviously something that I kind of openly encourage as be yourself.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be ashamed of, whether it's addiction, whether it's sexuality, whatever it is. It's something that we need to be ourselves with.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the turning point for me, was when I eventually had the courage to actually do it, and realise that, when when that moment came, I was 18-year-old, and when that moment came, my world didn't come crashing down. And I didn't do it at work, right? I did not come out at work. There was no way I was going to do that. It didn't feel safe. And to the point, I suppose, they didn't even know that about me, right? Maybe they did, right? I don't know. I didn't tell them that. They never ever referenced it or anything like that. But the one guy I worked with most of the time, older guy, it was awful. The way that he treated me at the time, and I didn't know any better, but he treated me like shit, to the point where he would, like, at the end of the day, he would drop me off as far away from the bus stop that I had to get the bus as he could, deliberately, and made that point clear. At lunchtime, it would be pissing with rain outside, and he would smoke in the van and shut all the windows, and I wasn't allowed to have my window open, and if I wanted to not be in the smoke, I had to go outside. Anything I'd done was wrong. It was just, no matter what I'd done, it was never right. And it got really to the point where he actually turned around and smacked me in the face one day, like a backhander to the face, which was just so unexpected. But I'll never forget that day because he was on his ladder, cut a bit of plasterboard, came back into the house, and he just says, that's not what I asked you to do. I didn't ask you to do that. And I stood up for myself and kind of said, no, it is. That's exactly what you asked for, and that's what I've done, and that's why I've done it. Like, I'm no stupid. Then he hit me, but I just hit him right back. Like, my natural reflex was to hit him back, but I punched him off his ladder, and then I just walked out the house, and he came chasing after me, saying like, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about this, like, you know, you're in as much trouble as me and all this, and we sat down, and we both just agreed to keep it to ourselves, but he had a big shiner, and he did change a little bit towards me after that, because I was probably 19 at that point, so I'd actually came out in my friend group, which were a lot of guys. We were always going to football every weekend, a group of guys. So that was hard in itself. A group of guys, there was a group of girls I was going about with it as well. But I think that gave me a lot more confidence, is that I had this group of people that I thought were not going to accept me. And then all of a sudden, that was proven to not be true. So I think that helped me in the workplace, and to kind of deal with all that shit that was going on. But yeah, I just felt like at that point I wasn't good enough for anything, you know. Working in that job, I just felt like the way that I was spoken to and treated, like I was just a piece of shit. So I was always worried to leave that job, even though I hated it, because I thought nobody else would want to hire me. Why would anyone want to hire me? Clearly I'm useless. So it was an interesting time, and I think that did shape a lot of me that time.
I think so as well. I think you've obviously learned a lot. I think it's probably shaping where you are now. That you've got ambitions for doing other stuff, and I think it could have affected you the other way. But like having that strong friendship group obviously helped as well. That you could kind of fall back on them. I would say I've related to what you said with when I came out about my addiction, because it was like I remember sitting on my couch. I'd wrote my thing on Facebook. I'd done my podcast, so it was like I couldn't go back now. But I sat on that couch for about 30 minutes, no hitting post, because I was like, this is like a massive thing for me.
Huge.
But I felt as if I was doing the right thing, because I knew that I was living a lie for most of my life. And as soon as I hit post on the Facebook post, I remember falling to the floor and just like I didn't even look at my phone for the next like half an hour, because I was like, it was just such a weight off my shoulders, and I don't think I was really scared of the reaction, but I don't know, it was a weird kind of feeling, but then I seen the reaction. Everybody was so supportive, and it obviously made me think, right, I know I'm doing the right thing here, and obviously that kind of springboarded me into a place where I've got the confidence now to kind of speak about it, openly speak about it with friends, and I think 99% of people do back you and can want the best for you. So I think it's similar to kind of what your situation was. It was more a big deal than you thought. And people actually just like, come what, that's fine. Connor's Connor. He's no, it doesn't change who you are, I reckon. But
yeah,
aye. So that's how I could relate.
Like, it's interesting that you can put that relatability onto it, because I've never thought about it like that before. That there would be a relatability there between, you know, those two stories, but there absolutely is, because what you've just described is exactly what it felt like. What I was phoning people to tell them, and I was like, "Are you still my pal?" Like, almost. It was just that's literally what I was doing. And it's funny. Someone mentioned this to me the other day, like that I'm still like pals with from all those years ago, and said, "I can remember you phoning me and asking me like if I'm still going to be your pal," and they were like, no one cared. And I think anything like this, anything, you know, whether it's addiction, whether it's sexuality, whatever it is, the reaction, the thought that you have in your head is always so much worse than what the reality is going to be. I catastrophize a lot, and I think a lot of people do catastrophize. I think a lot of us are guilty for that.
Definitely. I think like when I'm putting videos up, I put videos up every day for pretty much 18 months. And I know that a lot of people was like, oh, here it is again. But if I worry about what other people think, or can get to a stage where people aren't even really interested, can it's like you do your own thing, can so you maybe think that everybody's thinking that, but people are really not even that bothered, and the people that are bothered are the ones that are taking the relatable stuff or taking the inspiration.
Yeah,
So that's who you're doing it for. It's no the people that are scrolling past, and you know what, people could scroll past all they want. It's no big deal. Ken, it's like I'm no I don't want to be preaching to everybody, but it's at the same time I'm telling people be open about your problems
yeah,
and Ken, or being open about various different things in life, because you do feel better after it.
totally. I think I've always tried to remember this thing in my head, and I've told other people the same thing when they're overthinking about certain things, and it sounds really blunt, but it's meant with kindness, and it's just no one cares. Like, remember, no one actually gives a shit. Everyone's so wrapped up in their own selves and their own shit and their own overthinking, they don't actually care like about what you're doing. The same with going to the gym and stuff. People are like, oh, everyone's looking at me, and it's a total valid feeling to have when you're in an uncomfortable and unfamiliar environment. But the truth is, no one actually cares, because everyone's too busy looking at themselves. Especially in the gym, you've got guys that are all the time. They're far too busy looking at themselves to be looking at you. So I think that's a good one to just remember when you're going to do something scary, or whether it's posting content or whatever it is. It's just remember, no one cares. The ones that do are probably the ones that are interested in what you've
And
got to say.
and there will be some people out there that do watch it all, and they didn't like it on everything because they didn't like that you're doing something about it.
Totally.
But so can I always say, just do you. No, nobody's interested. Just do you and keep yourself right. If it's helping you, if it's helping other people, then you better. But aye, do you.
Totally.
So I just carry on where you kind of left off.
Aye, so thankfully the blessing in disguise was that I got paid off. So it was the end of my apprenticeship, and yeah, I got let go. I hadn't even finished it yet. I was a few months off finishing, but they were like, look, we'll pay you garden leave. The work's dried up. There's nothing for you to do, but we'll see you through to your apprenticeship. So I seen it through. I got my qualification, but yeah, it was a blessing in disguise. And I ended up moving abroad. I tried to spend the summer in Turkey, and just, I don't know, have a bit of a break, and see if I could do some work over there. But when I was out there, I won't go into the details, but I had a bit of a rough time. Something happened in my personal life, and it's something I won't go into depth with here. But it didn't go well. I was out there for a month and then while I was out there, all the feelings of anxiety and panic attacks all came rushing back with what had happened. I ended up in hospital on a drip, because I was malnourished. I stopped eating. I was drinking constantly, and I wasn't even aware that I wasn't eating. And I wasn't drinking to hide, and I think that's a good distinction to make. I wasn't drinking to get away from it. I was in an environment where I was surrounded by people that were on holiday and people that were wanting to have a drink and a good time. So I was doing that, right? It wasn't because I was trying to mask anything, or hide my problems in alcohol. It's just that was the environment I was in. And yeah, it didn't do me any favours, and I ended up not very well and coming home. And when I came home, went on to antidepressants that didn't agree with me at all. Just didn't work for me. It just made me feel worse. And I know that certain people can have certain reactions to things like that, and it just didn't agree with me. So yeah, after that point, I ended up seeing a psychologist, and then we started to unwrap some of the stuff that had been going on over time, and that specific trigger that kind of sent me over the edge at that point as well. So yeah, I'd come home, I'd kind of seen that through. I was with my psychologist. There was a period at that time when I could barely leave the house. I could barely be around people without having a panic attack. They were so frequent, and I would sometimes drive myself up to hospital saying I was having a heart attack, and they would be like, "You're not, like, you're fine." And it felt so real to me. It
Mm-hmm.
felt so real. That something was genuinely wrong with me health wise, and there wasn't. It was just my adrenaline was running overtime and creating these symptoms. And that fight or flight response was kicking in when I was lying in my bed, or when three people entered a room rather than just one. It was really bad. It was really severe. But my psychologist that I was seeing made a big difference to that and started to really help. Um, and I started to get better after more talking and more opening up about it, and that it started to move me in a better direction. But then she was going to go on maternity leave, so I was getting handed off to somebody else, which I was like, I can't do that. I can't just open up again and start again.
Mm-hmm.
I still wasn't in a good place. Don't get me wrong, right? I was still struggling. I was still having the panic attacks, and I was still struggling to kind of be in big groups of people and that type of thing. But I knew something had to change, and I don't know why. I was only 21 maybe at the time, and I don't know what went on in my head. So I'll be really honest. But my friend had done a job working over in France as a campsite rep, a courier was what they were called, for Eurocamp. And I heard it was a great thing to do, and it was really a great experience. And I applied for a job doing that. And in my head, I think what I was thinking was that my safe comfort zone is my bedroom at my mum and dad's house. It's not a really healthy place to feel like you need to retreat to when you're struggling. So I felt like I needed to create a new space that I couldn't escape from. So like an environment that was so full on but had no get out, and eventually my body would just deal with it, and I would just have to deal with it. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
or I wouldn't. I would deal with it or I wouldn't. So I applied for that job, got it, and moved to France and started cleaning caravans and manning a reception desk on a campsite. So the blessing in disguise was the joinery apprenticeship ending, and a few things happened in between, but it then led me into that job, which was where everything changed.
Aye, I kind of relate to obviously you going to Turkey. I went to Rhodes, and I went to a camp in America as well, and it was I was escaping. I loved it. I loved it when I done it, but I was escaping my life because I wasn't. I knew I was living a destructive life, and I felt as if doing that would help it, and it did help it in a way. But as soon as I returned back, it was back into the same routines and the same kind of aye life in Scotland. So aye, that was the same. I done both the same things.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a great thing to do. You get great experiences. But I was running away. I wanted a fresh start where people didn't know me. But I also wanted an environment that I couldn't escape. And I think that was, and honestly, the thing about that was that I was having panic attacks and freaking out and couldn't be in groups of people. After a week, maybe even less than that, in that environment, that was gone, completely gone. Those symptoms were gone. I was starting to thrive in this place with these complete strangers that I was then working with, all from the UK. We all ended up on a ferry together and travelled across together, a big group of strangers. And yeah, I was a totally new person. I was a completely different person. I didn't have all those feelings that I had before. I felt like I was totally myself. So yeah, that was a massive turning point for me. And when I was out there, by the end of that summer, I didn't get a promotion, but my boss moved on to another role, and it was only about 5 or 6 weeks left. And he kind of said, "Can you just keep things ticking over when I'm gone?" So it wasn't an official promotion, but I was trusted to do something like that, and I did take it on, and I loved it. And that was my first kind of semi-leadership role that I ever had. But when I think back to what I was like before, and then I couldn't have imagined myself being in that situation where I was able to do something like that. So it completely transformed me. So I think doing something really scary is really, really important, and just say yes to things that scare you, and then deal with it later. Like, even if you don't know how you're going to deal with it, say yes and figure it out.
Aye, I think like the self development of that would have been huge. Obviously, feeling terrible when you're joining the apprenticeship to feeling to leading a wee bit and kind of getting that job satisfaction that you probably never had.
Yeah.
Like when I went to America, I went myself as well, and I remember going to a hostel, and it was like people from all over Britain as well that you'd never met before, and I was quite a really quiet boy then, and
No.
throwing myself into that environment, I was kind of like I was in the deep end, but I felt I got so much self development out of it, I kind of and confidence. Kind of it was like you. It's like what I speak about nowadays. It's like when you put yourself in uncomfortable, you when you get through it, or you make it through that day, or you gain a friendship out of it. It's like, can you feel good about it? So I definitely didn't regret working away, and it was a big part of my life for where I am today.
Totally. You'll never go wrong, I don't think. I mean, maybe let's not say never, but I think typically that those experiences are gonna help to shape who you are. And you know what? Even if they don't work out well or don't turn out well, you learn from it, right? It's all learning.
And
Sometimes,
you've always got your home to come back to, eh? So your groups of pals or whatever, they're all still here, but you gain different friendships,
yeah,
and just I can you kind of fall into friendship groups at school, but then like in that environment you kind of lean towards certain people, and other people you didn't gel with as good, but it's like you've no option. You need to get on with people, eh?
definitely, definitely. And I think out there was a lot of drinking going on, right? A lot of drinking, and that was played a part in many parts of my life. There was a lot of drinking going on, and I think this is a really interesting point, because when I've been at therapy multiple times in the past, even in the last few years, and that comes up, they kind of they don't try and steer me towards it, but there's almost this tone of it's trying to escape, it's trying to hide, it's trying to run away, you're using it to cope. But it was never like that for me. I was never trying to do that. Like even if I flip back a bit, when I was at high school, I used to smoke a lot of weed at high school. I got excluded from school for smoking weed at one point. And I was really bad for that to the point. I stopped when I was 16, that's when I stopped, which is terrible. I shouldn't have started at that point, you know what I mean? I was started so young. And again, I wasn't doing that for escapism, even though I was dealing with a bunch of shit in my head, I wasn't escaping anything. It was part of the crowd I was in, kind of wanting to be a bit cool as well. But then I enjoyed it, I enjoyed doing it, I enjoyed the feeling. I've not touched it in God knows how many years. But yeah, then the alcohol thing took over after I stopped kind of smoking, and I was drinking all the time after that. But in social settings, social environments, same in France, it was always social at the discotheque. we were always having a drink. It was just the culture, right? And I think it is a big part of the culture, and it's binge drinking as the culture, and it's accepted and it's normal, and it's just the way things are. So yeah, I think that we'll kind of get into a bit more of that as we go, but the alcohol stuff ended up becoming a bit of a problem over time. And I'm still someone that drinks. I do drink, but I don't drink often, and when I do drink, I don't drink much. But yeah, we'll kind of delve into that as we go. But yeah, France was a complete turning point for me.
So after that, you just kind of got back in Scotland. Did you kind of go? Where did you go work wise, and kind of where did it go for there?
Well, I came back and then I moved to Australia. So I came back in October, moved to Australia in November, December it would have been, because I was there for Christmas. So I moved over there and lived with my uncle and auntie and my two nieces. And then my friend that I met in France came out and joined us, and then we drove from Perth on the west coast to Melbourne on the east coast. So we had a camper van and we went over there and drove to Melbourne, stayed in the hostel, had an amazing time out there, absolutely amazing. But I only stayed there for 4 months, and then I came back home and then moved back to France. But that time in France, first time I done 6 months, and the second time I done 8 months. But I was the manager at that point. I did get promoted, and I went out and I led the team for Eurocamp on one of our flagship sites. I say one of our flagships, like I still work there. One of their flagship sites in northern France. So I done that for a second year. But then even after that, came back home for a brief period. I went back into the trade a little bit. I was a skilled labourer on Moss Moran over in Fife. So I'd done that very briefly. Hated it again. It was winter time. It was freezing cold. It was just dreadful. But then moved back to Australia again, just for a couple of months. Came back, moved to France again. Yada yada yada. Same old story. So that was my 3 years. Was just back and forward between France and Australia pretty much. Until I was in Australia. I found out my sister-in-law was pregnant, and I think I just felt a kind of calling to come back. You know, I kind of thought, this is going to be your first niece. Like, are you going to miss that? I would have regretted it, I think, if I hadn't went home. So yeah, I went home at that point. I didn't know if I was ready or not, but yeah, at that point I just decided it was probably time. So I thought, I'm going to go home and get a real job, which I did.
Again, I was planning on going back out to Zante. So I worked in Rhodes for
Love
6
that.
months. Aye, so I done 6 months in Rhodes, and then I came back and done just over a month in Lapland, and then I was due to go back to Zante in the April time, but I got a full time job, and I was like swithering. My heart was set on going away again,
Yeah.
but I was at the stage of my life that I was like coming up to 30. I think I was like 28, 29,
Yeah.
and I was like, right, I need to kind of grow up. It's like a young man's game. I was one of the older ones at like 28, and I think I made the right decision, but at the time I didn't want to. But I think settling down and kind of just realising that to come home was the best thing to do for me.
It's hard though. It's so hard making that choice at that point because you're still so pulled.
Yeah, no, like I say, I absolutely loved working away. I've actually got one of my mates that I worked away. We were meeting next weekend. He stays down in Brighton, so it's his 40th. So we're heading down there, and we're all going to meet up. And we've met up, I think, 3 times, or maybe 3 or 4 times since I stopped doing it, and that was like 15 years ago. So
Wow.
I'm really looking forward to that. Can you meet some great characters away in that? So
Definitely.
I'm buzzing for that.
Nice, nice. It's so, again, it's another relatable point, you know, because when I did come home, I was curious about should I go back out again at some point, and the next stage for me was another kind of big promotion, and I thought, I don't know if I would get that or not, and I applied to see what would happen, and I got a phone call telling me that I'd got Dunrell, which was the Holland campsite, the site manager. Dunrell was mine. I think it was site manager. It was either site manager or senior, but I think it was site manager. Big deal. And I was then like, oh my god, what am I going to do now? I'd landed a job at a bank, so I was working in finance, in a call centre, but I was working in finance. I'd got my foot in the door, and I slept on it, and then I decided that I wasn't going to go, and I was going to stick out my temp job, working in finance. But so yeah, I stuck that out and stayed home, which turned out to be a really good decision because I kind of then moved through different roles working in finance. So I was in a call centre taking calls about banking and cards and stuff like that, and then an opportunity came up to become a mortgage advisor. I got made permanent, then I applied to be a mortgage advisor. They put me through that qualification. So all of a sudden I'd been living abroad doing these random crazy jobs in these crazy times, to then a year and a bit later and I was a mortgage advisor for a financial firm, which just felt like it was complete polar opposites. And it was funny because my family also worked at the same bank, and that like my mum, my brother and my sister-in-law, and they all worked at the same bank. And when I said I was going to do it, they were like, no way will you do that, you'll never last, you've always been outdoors or outdoorsy kind of jobs, like there's no way you're going to stick it out. But it just fit, it just worked. I was speaking to people, you know, and I like to talk, so I think it was it was a good fit.
I think being a people person, you kind of, I mean, it's different to maybe your people person working in a camp sort of thing, but you speak to people, share with and meet people in the job that you do, so
Yeah.
it's always good. So kind of what age are we kind of now in your life? Are we kind of pushing on
We
where
would
you
have
are now?
been, we would have been now because probably 24, 25, yeah, 24, between 24 and 25 at that point. And I loved the leadership role I had abroad. I'd done it for 3 years. When I was in Australia, I worked in a Nando's, and they tried to get me to be their supervisor. But I was only there briefly before I moved to another place, so it wouldn't have made sense. But I love that type of thing, right? And when an opportunity at the bank and mortgages came up to do the same thing and the teams, I was like, well, I'm going to apply. So I applied, got the job, and after that I spent a good 8 to 9 years working in finance, like as a people leader, team manager, people leader, whatever you want to call it. So I've done that for a number of years, which was great. I loved it, and there was loads of challenges, and I moved about different areas, doing different kind of, between banking, banking and fraud and cards and mortgages, different kind of areas, in finance. But yeah, that's kind of how those years went from a work point of view. In the background, at home, in home life, I'd bought my own house, so I'd moved out with mum and dad. I bought my own house. I had a really great group of friends around me. I was living a really great life. But the one constant that was always there was the binge drinking. And my friends would attest to the fact that I was a pain with a drink. I was good fun with a drink to a point, but I was a pain because I'm the one that would do your disappearing act. And everyone had to worry about me and come looking for me or look after me, and it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool, but it didn't put me off though.
I've got a few friends myself that early years that kind of you know that they're brilliant laughing at, but then I went on holiday with a guy and it was like we were there for a week and the first 2 nights were brilliant, but then the last 5 nights I was wanting to get a flight home because it was like it was just too much. Yeah, but he's a great guy, like, so kind of nothing bad to say about him, but sometimes with a drink it's too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it can totally mess things up, and I was doing a lot of. I started going to the gym as well, so I was working out a lot. Had a personal trainer, and I was really, really looking after myself in the gym. But then I was going out and drinking on the weekends and whatnot. And whilst I was looking after myself, it was like there was two things happening at the same time. On one hand, I was trying to look after myself. On the other hand, I was messing myself up. And that was affecting me mentally for sure, because the anxiety that I felt, the fear that I felt after big weekends of drinking or drugs or whatever was going on, it just spiraled into the following week. So it was a really good time in my life, and no one would know that there was anything going on under the surface. But it was just like so accepted that you would just go and binge drink, and even though I was problematic, no one ever would then tell me not to or ask me not to. Not that it was anyone else's responsibility but mine, but you would think that it would put people off wanting to be with me, or spend time with me. You'd think they'd be like, right, you can come out, but you need to get a grip, or have a stern word in my ear. But that never happened. For a long time, eventually it started to happen, which kind of...
Do you think they maybe didn't want to have that conversation with you in case you were in kind of denial, or was it just... do you think there was any of that in it?
I don't know. It was funny. It felt like it was a funny thing, like people would be like laughing, like what a state you got in, and it was, yeah. And I think that's what's wrong with the culture, is that
you almost went into character when you had a drink, and it was like you were almost trying to be the I'll need to be Connor that kind of has a great time and does something random.
Aye.
And rather than just be yourself and aye.
And it just, no matter what happened, it never put me off. Nothing ever put me off. Even though it was so bad sometimes, to the point of it, like we were on holiday, a big group of us, and like I'll never forget that, because I went missing. We were in Malta, didn't appear again until the next morning, and it was just, it was bad. I'd been put to bed, and then someone came back to make sure I was alright, and I was gone, and that was it till the next day. My phone was broke, so my phone was gone. I didn't have anything. It was ridiculous, and even that didn't stop me. even that didn't stop me from continuing. So I think whilst, yeah, the binge drinking was a big problem for me. And that didn't stop until 2024. Well, 2020, end of 2024. 2025 being the first year where that had fully resolved itself. But before we kind of get to that point, there was more kind of good stuff happening in between. Like, I was really enjoying the gym and the training, but I ended up with an injury in my shoulder, and it was just really problematic. I then turned to a different type of training. I turned to calisthenics, which is kind of body weight training, handstand, but like balancing, front and back levers, that type of stuff, which is why I've got, maybe you can't see them, but I've got gymnastic rings hanging up behind me, big bars for doing my home workouts and stuff. So I really immersed myself in that and really enjoyed it. And I ended up qualifying as a gym instructor and then personal trainer. I started Conquer Movement, which was my personal training business, where I used to run classes, teaching people beginner calisthenics classes, and I had a few clients, but I was doing that on the side of the day job. So it was kind of tough to manage both things. So one thing slipped, and that was my own training. So I ended up giving it up because I found that I wasn't looking after myself anymore, because all I was doing was working during the day for the finance company, and then I was away at night either making prep for classes, or I was teaching classes, or I had a client. So it was just it was too full on. But education was always a big thing, because like before I got my PT qualifications, I went to uni and done that alongside my day job, and I'd done it for 3 years and got a business degree. So I don't know, I think that's probably an interesting point to unpack, because I never sit still. I can't sit still, and my therapist has talked to me about this and said, like, do you think that's because you're too scared to sit still? You feel like you need to occupy your mind, or you're scared of where it will go? I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. But I'm not going to see it as a bad thing, because I like to be busy. And if it furthers my education and what I know and how I can potentially help other people, which is kind of where my focus is now, then all the better for it. So yeah, that kind of sums up a few more kind of things that were going on in the background up to the point of then qualifying and starting PT, starting Conquer Movement, stopping Conquer Movement. That was hard in itself, when you start a company like you think's going to do big, and you feel like all your friends and family are watching, and then you've got to give it up and you feel like a failure. So that's hard in itself, I guess.
Aye, that's one thing. Like, obviously, I've started gambling Leap and now doing Leap. It's hard, and I find it hard to. Like, I still play football, so that's something I do Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. So that kind of keeps me fit in that sense. But I like to go to the gym as well, and I feel as if I've kind of let that slip, because I'm prioritising what I'm doing with this, and I'm kind of cool with that, because I think I've got the self-awareness that I would like to do it, but I think right now it's just almost parked up. So it's something that I intend to get back into, going to the gym a wee bit more, or going swimming, or doing, like, I've obviously seen that you do the calisthenics. I've never done it. I think it's obviously a really good thing it probably improves your balance and strength and loads of different things. So it's an interesting kind of outlook that you've got kind of towards your training, and it's obviously working for what you were and what you are now. So like I say, I think it's positive. And when you say about starting up the kind of Conquer Movement, it is so hard. Like I say, I've been doing this for 19 months, and I've spoke at maybe 15 different organisations, and I've done pretty much them all for free. And it's like I'm investing in flyers and banners and presentations and websites, and you feel as if you're not getting appreciated for what you're doing. Kind of like you're trying to build something, and although I never set out to do it for money, it's costing me money to do it. And obviously you want to build yourself up to, it's like an apprenticeship doing what you're doing. You're not going to go in straight away and say, look, I'm charging this for a presentation or whatever. But I think when you've kind of built a reputation and you could see the impact it's having, you kind of want to then kind of then start maybe getting a wee bit of money for doing it. And it's just natural. It's like anything in life. But
Yeah.
aye. So what I would say with that is like obviously you've started it, and although I wouldn't look at it as a failure, I would just say it's someone that just didn't work at that time, or can, for whatever reason, I'm sure there was a lot of different reasons. So I wouldn't definitely not be put off doing something again. Can I say that I don't know the percentage, but most businesses fail within their first year sort of thing. So it's just being consistent and kind of believing in what you're doing, and that's a big part of it, and just sticking with it. And even when it's maybe not getting anywhere, but I know I kind of totally get it. If you're not getting the traction that you're wanting, that's kind of, you feel like you're battering the head off the wall again.
Yeah, totally. And I think for me, I think it was just a time thing. You know, it was that the time was a barrier. And I think someone in one of my teams said this to me one day. FAIL is an acronym for first attempt in learning. And I thought that kind of stuck with me, right? Because I thought, well, actually, that's a really good way to frame it. And when I think about Conquer Movement, it was great. I loved it, but it was my first attempt in learning. And there is something cooking in the background, which I'll not allude too much to here because it's still in its very early stages. But I'm working on something at the moment. But to go back to the kind of time thing, and even what you referenced the fact that you're doing what you're doing with Gambling Leap, but you're finding that you're then not prioritising your gym stuff as much, you know, but you're comfortable with that. And I think that's really important. And I heard something about, I think it's called the 4 burners model. I can't remember who came up with it, but it's basically saying that you can only have so many burners on the go at once. And otherwise they're just going to run out. So you've maybe got family, you've maybe got career, you've maybe got fitness, and then you've maybe got your relationship. Whatever your 4 things are, when you try and chuck something else on the burner, there's not enough rings. I think that was the way the analogy was. That's the way I picked up anyway, whether it's right or wrong. But I think that that's okay. And I think that's the thing about your environment and habits. All these great things that we're getting preached to all the time, you know, to build great habits, to make sure our environments work and all this stuff. All that's great, but one of the key things is being adaptable and not placing a whole identity on one thing. You know, if I place my whole identity on calisthenics and that's me, I'm Connor, there's calisthenics and that's who I am, and then I become injured, suddenly I'm no one because I've attached my identity to one thing. So it's like, well, what are your 4 burners? What are the 4 things that are important to you? And if one of them slips because something happens, then you've not lost yourself, you've not lost your whole identity, but at the same time, you know what's going to replace that, you know, something else can come into it. So it's okay to go through seasons in our lives where one thing takes a backseat because something else becomes a priority, and I think it's really great that you're able to articulate that, and the fact that you're okay. You said yourself, I'm okay with that, and that's so important, is be okay with it, because it's going to happen, it's inevitable. You're going to go through seasons. Don't get too married to your habits because they will change, and that's okay. I
believe it's all about self-awareness. Like, I'm aware that this isn't great and my life's not perfect, but if it was getting to the stage where what I was doing was affecting how I felt in my life and how different things in my life, then I would need to address it. But I didn't believe I'm in the position where I need to address it. It's in the back burner, and I'll address it when I need to.
Yep, exactly.
There seems to be a wee sound in the background. I'll also edit this out, but I don't know. I don't know where to.
I wonder if it's where we. Is that away now?
Nah, it's kind of like a buzzing. Let me see.
I have no idea what that would be.
It's maybe nothing. It's maybe just someone, I don't know.
Some sort of interference. Can you still hear it now?
Aye, it just seemed to come maybe the past 3 minutes or something, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. I hope it's not anyway. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not. Anyway, we'll edit that bit out, and so I think we'll kind of come into it here.
Right, well, I was just kind of saying about the PT stuff and the Conquer Movement stuff.
Yep.
I guess what comes after that, I guess.
We were speaking about prioritising can basically your happiness and didn't let it affect your life.
Yeah.
So I'll just come in and say, so now you're kind of at 2025. You're obviously developing a better mindset in the gym a lot more, focusing more on yourself probably than you've ever done.
Yeah.
So just kind of tell me where you are now, and kind of mentally and just physically and.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I'm in a really good place right now, and 2025 was brilliant for me, and 2024 was particularly bad, which I think is what led to 2025 being so good. So a few things went wrong in 2024, which all involved alcohol to a degree. Whether alcohol was the reason behind all of it, I don't know. And I won't go into the detail of all of it here. But the crux of it is there was instances of me being out and drinking that caused problems. Probably the biggest one was when I was on holiday, and I ended up collapsing and knocking myself out. And it's funny because I was hesitating there whether to say it, because even then I was hiding that fact. I was embarrassed about what had actually happened, but the truth is I'd had too much to drink, and whether or not that mixed with the heat, who knows. But I'd not long got off the plane, collapsed, and I ended up in hospital. Had fractured my eye socket, and I got a few CT scans to make sure my head was okay. It was, thankfully, but I was concussed for a few days, and it ruined the first few days of my holiday, and I didn't drink much for the rest of that holiday. But that plus a couple other instances, and someone very close to me in 2024 towards the end of the year passed away due to alcoholism, and that was a massive blow and a shock. I had no idea that there was a problem, but the problem was so severe that by the time I got there, the person only had a couple of days and then passed away. So that was really rough. So I think 2024 really was like a light bulb moment. It was like I couldn't continue like that. I just couldn't. And all the times that had never been able to stop me before, none of it mattered anymore. This was it. I could not continue to do it to myself, and to the people around me, the people that I love, my friends, my family, worried about me. If when I went out drinking, my mum would be messaging me the next day saying "Mother hen here, just checking that you're okay." That's terrible, and that was just normal, and that's terrible for her to have to worry like that, because I'm out on the lash, and she doesn't know what's going to happen, what phone call she's going to get. So that was 2024 was a big turning point for me. So when I moved into 2025, I'd let myself go a little bit as well, right? Health-wise, fitness-wise, I wasn't looking after myself, training as much. I had a few injuries. So in 2025, I got myself another personal trainer, focused on calisthenics. Joe, his name, really great guy, helped me a lot. We got through so much in 2025. My calisthenics skills developed more than they'd ever been before. I got myself into really great shape. So it was a really great year. But it also taught me so much about mindset. I read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, and really started to get into the depth of human habits and human behaviours. Men particularly not always wanting to speak up and get help, and suicide rates being so bad. And I really started to immerse myself and try and understand the mechanics of all these different things that were going on, and why I was the way I was, why I'd been able to make such a sudden change to my life, to the point where I started off with a rule of 3, where I could only, if I was going to drink, and I could only have 3. That didn't work because it was just too prescriptive. So now I'm in a place where I just go out and I have a drink and I know when to stop, and I do, and it works and it's fine. But I never had that before. But when it comes to, sorry,
I think being honest with the people around you, your partner and friends, if they kind of know that it's maybe not a problem to can, so it's like you can't drink, but it's like can just maybe say to you, or can what you've maybe had a bit too much, or can let's say, I think you're obviously in a place where you feel comfortable to do it, and that's the sort of thing that I kind of encourage. It's like can if somebody wants to drink again, then it's fine. As long as you're aware of your boundaries and your habits. If it's obviously becoming an addiction and a problem, then you need to address it. Of course you do. But if you're in a position where you're open and honest with everybody around you, it builds that protection. If you're on a night out and you're maybe getting a bit loud or getting back to your old ways, I'm sure they'll put you up on it because you've been honest with them about the kind of issue that could escalate. Yeah.
yeah. Do you know what though? It's interesting because you're right. You're so right, and you've said this to me off podcast before. And I've not done that. Apart from
Oh,
to my
really?
partner. I've not told everyone that, you know.
Right, right, right.
If anyone I know listens to this, they'll be like, eh? I knew he was a riot, but I didn't know that, you know, he'd actually like accepted the fact that he's got a problem with binge drinking, you know, and it's actually a problem rather than just being funny. But yeah,
I,
I've not had to, but I think I should. I think it would help.
let's say, I think most of them will probably say, aye, no, we know. Or they'll be like, aye, it's no big deal. But let's say, I just think, from my personal point of view anyway, me kind of being honest and open with my problem, it builds so much protection. So if I'm around people that are betting, I didn't feel like I'm going to get drawn in because I've got the kind of so many barriers in place that doesn't even give me that temptation anymore. And
Yeah.
like I say, that's incredible for where I was. And I believe a lot of it is down to just being honest and open about my problem. And it builds so much protection.
I definitely want to do more of that. I definitely want to do more of that. Because I'm not out of the woods, right? You're never out of the woods. You're always. It's always possible that you fall back into that. So I think I'm probably being a bit complacent by not. So I think that's a really good takeaway for me anyway to pluck up the courage. And you know what? It's not actually scary when I think about it. I think I'm quite comfortable to do it. But yeah, I think 2025 was definitely my year in terms of, you know, my mindset, my health, my fitness, learning, educating myself, and discipline and habits are a huge thing that I wanted to kind of understand more of and understand better, because I always managed to get up and do workouts. I always just managed to do it. It was never a question for me, and I know that a lot of people really struggle to maintain that level of discipline. So I've been trying to understand, well, what's different? You know, what's different for me? What's different for other people? And I don't think we ever really get to the root of it often enough. I think that you see these people online, these influencers and whatnot, and they're you know, they're ripped, they're shredded, they're doing all these challenges, and you know, that looks like the norm, but it's not the norm. You know, it's their day job. It's not the norm. And for me, I was fortunate enough that my environment made it really easy for me to get up and train, because I've got my gym in my house. You know, for most of my days, the day I'd go into the actual gym is on a Saturday, so it's my full free day. I don't have any kids, you know, so I think that there's a lot to be said for having personal trainers and trying to build discipline. But I think that, and what I want to focus on more over my next kind of project, is going to be how to really understand what you need to do to build the systems and actually analyse the systems that are in place right now, because we're all governed by systems that form part of our identities, that form part of who we are today. And that could be that you've got input and you've got output. So, you know, you've got demand coming from your day job, coming from your work. That's draining you, it's demanding your time, it's demanding your attention. But then the minute you get away from that, your attention's been demanded by a screen in your hand, or by your television screen, by the food in your cupboard, and all these things that are all just in front of us all the time. And they're just so easily accessible. They all just form part of a system that our brains are literally designed to function in. You know, we're designed since we came from the cave to be to look for instant gratification, to look at instant ways to be comfortable, because back then it was survival. But right now our brains haven't changed, but we're still living in a system that feeds off all of this stuff. And I think what we try to do with new workout programs, exercise programs, is we don't look at the system, we just say, right, what we're going to do is we're going to throw this workout program at this person, 4 workouts a week or 5 workouts a week, and we just chuck that on top of a system that's already at capacity. And at first that person does it and they find ways to make it happen because they're motivated and they're excited. But motivation, as we all know, doesn't last, and then that's the one thing that falls away. But what we've not done is we've not really understood those systems that are currently in place and holding us all together, and started to understand which parts of them we need to adjust, and how we can very slowly bring new habits into that cycle and into that system, and not try and do it all at once. So I guess the important thing is that I don't think we do enough is we don't get into the root of why discipline often is so hard to achieve. For me, I call it an anchor habit, and I know it's not an anchor habit in the sense that it's usually described. An anchor habit is usually something that you build habit stacking from. So it's a habit that you already do, and you add stuff onto it to make it easier to do those extra things. But for me, my anchor habit is a cold shower. And the reason I call it my anchor habit is because it's my one absolute non-negotiable thing that I do every single day, is have a freezing cold shower. I don't really know why I started doing that, right? But a freezing cold shower is what I do to start every single day. And by doing that repeatedly over time, that one thing that is not comfortable, the one thing I don't want to do, don't like doing, but do it anyway, I think it's really helped me to build more self-belief, more self-confidence, actually love myself a bit more, because I'm like, you keep doing this, you keep showing up and doing this really horrible thing that you didn't want to do. And I think that for me is my anchor, because then it means I'm worthy of showing up for all the other things. Does that make sense?
Aye, definitely. The thing is, the motivation kind of comes and goes, whereas discipline that's non-negotiable. Like you say, once you've got kind of discipline, then the healthy habits kind of come along with it, because it just develops that healthier mindset. And again, that's a lot of the stuff that I kind of promote as well, is developing that healthy mindset by taking action and by creating the changes. Like if you're going through bad cycles in life and you stay the same, or like you go to the doctors and take your antidepressants, if you didn't change how you are as a person, how do you expect these to help you? For me, the first thing you need to do is almost analyze or reflect on how your life is, and then say, like, I'm not going to try to change everything. I'll just try and get out for my steps in a day, or start looking at eating healthier for my lunch, and then once you start hitting each of these goals, then they become a bigger goal and more manageable. So it's not as intimidating or kind of much of a thought as you first going in being like, right, I want to get fitter, I want to eat better, I want to kind of meditate, I want to do all these things that are going to help my life, but it's just mere thought, so you end up just giving up and then falling back into your old habits. So aye, so totally on board with what you're saying, and hopefully like 2026 is a good year for you. So what's your kind of plans? Do you know what to speak too much about it yet, or is it just that you're working on someone? And because that's great that you are working on someone, and you didn't need to share it because you didn't want to put any more pressure on yourself. But
it's good to put pressure on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I just get pressure probably gives you a wee bit more accountability. Let us say I've probably spoke about the app that I'm getting released for the last year because I'm excited about it, and but it kind of puts pressure because then everybody knows about it, and so it's. But I like that because then it's more kind of you need to deliver and want to deliver at the back of it. So it gives you that accountability. Let us say.
Well, yeah, okay. It's not going to be conquer movement, right? I feel like that's had its time, it's had its place, but it is going to be health, fitness, mindset based community. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be something that's built for men, and it's going to be built for long term, sustainable health, fitness, and mindset. So that I guess the shift from what is being offered typically right now, from what my research and what you see, I guess, on social media on top of that, is you've got fitness programs that are out there where they do talk about mindset and they talk about habits and they talk about that type of thing. And their goal essentially is that you will train with them for a period and you should then be able to walk on your own 2 feet after that. But what you're typically seeing after that point is people always end up gravitating back to a personal trainer at some point because they fall off, they end up in a different situation, and yeah, they learned how to deal with what they were doing then in that environment, but they've not now learned how to do it in the environment they're in, so they end up having to revert again, and it just follows this big loop. So my goal is to create a community that's not personal training but is low cost, easily accessible to people to join, where you've got a group of people that are a similar boat from you. You join, you go through an onboarding experience where you start to better understand your identity, your environment, the different things that are going on in those spaces that you can really slowly adapt and change. And I think this is probably the bit that's going to be hardest for people that join this, is that when you join, your first few weeks, you're not going to be jumping straight into doing mad workouts and doing mad challenges. It's going to be very slow and steady to win the race. So that's what I'm working on building at the moment.
Aye, and like what you mentioned earlier, like sustainability, I think that's so important because you get, I mean, you see, we're talking about the day at my work, the people taking Monjaro, that's like a massive thing that like people are taking that as like a quick way out. We've seen it over the years with your slimming worlds and there's all the different kind of programs, but like you say, a lot of them they'll maybe do it and they'll lose a lot of weight and then they put it back on. And then they go through cycles of doing that. And I believe as well it's creating that sustainability where you're maybe no depriving yourself of some treats or and again, I believe it's all about self-awareness and like if you are having that bar of chocolate at night, it's like you're not excessively eating it and you're aware of how it's impacting your training or your plan or stuff like that. It's no, because I think when you do end up depriving yourself, then that's when. But everybody's different as well. Some people could do the no treats and get themselves ripped, and that's great. But some people can't, and I think the people that can't, they will end up reverting back to their old ways because it's easier and it's familiar, and it's just so much easier to go back to what you're comfortable with.
100%. So yeah, long-term, sustainable health, fitness, and mindset. It's the whole package, the whole thing done together for the long haul. So that's what I'm working on. So I'm very excited about it. Very excited, and I am putting a lot of hours into it. So yeah, there's more on that to come.
That's brilliant. I'll definitely keep in touch with that, and it's probably something that I need to, like I say, I mentioned earlier, I need to get a wee bit more accountability towards my maybe gym work or whatever. So, that's something that I'd be interested in. So, we'll obviously be in touch. So, and if there's nothing more for you want to share, is there anything?
No, thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it. And I know we've kind of covered a lot of ground in terms of my background and whatnot. I think the thing I was thinking about, because before I came on, I thought, what would be the one thing I would actually say on here? And I think it's the simplest thing that's been a huge game changer for me is the anchor habit. And I know I'm not using that in the right sense, so if James Clear from Atomic Habits was listening, he'd slap me because it's not the right word, but it's my anchor. Finding something that is a total non-negotiable that you can do every single day that's for you, not for somebody else, for you, is a game changer. If you can keep showing up and doing that to the point that it just becomes so ingrained in your neural pathways in your brain, the difference that makes to your overall mindset and approach to then building other habits is game changing. So that's been a huge thing for me. But otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it, Colin.
I totally agree, and like this is what I'm kind of trying to do with the Elite podcast. It's getting people in for different backgrounds, different kind of problems, journey in their life, and how they've got through it. And like I say, I think there'll be a lot of people listening or watching that'll be able to relate to what you've said. Totally different to me in a lot of ways, but relatable in a lot of ways as we spoke about. So, like I say, really appreciate it, and we'll speak again soon. All right.
Thanks, Colin. Cheers.
Cheers, bud.
Yeah.